Hey everyone, welcome to the Anexinet, the official podcast for Anexinet. This is episode 37, recorded September 14th, 2018. I'm your host, Ned Bellavance, Director of Cloud Solutions here at Anexinet. Here on the Anexinet, we talk technology for the enterprise, covering infrastructure, app dev, analytics, and anything else that is shiny. On this episode, we'll be talking about the changing landscape of application and database security with Adam Burton, Strategic Security Engineer for Imperva. Welcome to the show, Adam.
Thank you very much.
Now, before we get into the conversation at hand, first, would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and your background in IT?
Sure. Once again, my name is Adam Burton. I'm a strategic security engineer here at Imperva. I've been in tech for, goodness gracious, over 20 years now.
So you don't actually have to give a number.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll tell you right now, I know
point.
your listeners can't see, but I'm bald. But if I had hair, it'd be gray. That's how long I've been in tech. But I've pretty much I grew up in the Bay Area. So
Okay.
I grew up during the tech boom, and I've probably had every IT job you can think of. I started off in data entry, went on to PC tech, technical support, system engineer, network engineer, security engineer. And for the last 15 years, I've been working as a SE.
Okay, great. And you enjoy the work, I assume?
I love it. I enjoy the work at Imperva. I've been here about 7 years, and this is the longest company I've worked for.
Wow, 7 years. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a lifetime for most IT.
Exactly.
So that's impressive. It speaks volumes about the company if you stay anywhere for 7 years. I passed the 5-year mark with Anexinet pretty recently.
Oh, congratulations.
And, yeah, thank you. So 5 years in consulting is like 20 years anywhere else.
In dog years?
In dog years, yeah. So what we're going to be talking about today is the changing landscape of security. And I know that's a hot button topic at the moment. I'm pretty sure not a week goes by where you don't hear about a security breach or a publicly available S3 bucket with sensitive information or a new zero-day exploit. I think one just came out about how a hacker can take a laptop and preload some firmware to get the encryption keys for most of the drive encryption technology. So that's terrifying.
Yeah.
How have you seen the security threat vectors changing and evolving in the last few years?
Well, I think in the last few years, as you know, we've always done, and this is being the security community, have done a great job of creating products that limit hackers' ability to hack you from the outside, external threats. So
Sure.
You started with the network firewall, checkpoints and such. As applications started to become big, you had your IDSs and IPSs when you bring applications into your network and let people come into your network. And then, of course, you have the WAFs, right? So we've done a good job or semi-good job of creating security products that defeat hackers coming in from the external side.
Sure.
So then the attack threshold moved, right? It moved internally. So now what hackers are attempting to do are cause insider threats, like compromise users and attack from the inside where the data is. And then additionally, so you got to combat that. So that landscape has changed. But then also with the cloud, all this lift and shift to the cloud is causing a whole bunch of other security problems, and we're going to have to meet those challenges as well. So I think luckily I'll have a job for quite a few more years.
Yeah, I don't think security's going away. And if anything, it's growing. I think the security market has been growing at like 25% or 50% clip the last few years. It's been crazy. You mentioned the cloud a little bit, and I think cloud is a great enabling technology for people to move their applications and gain the scalability and flexibility. But it's also a great opportunity for hackers to take advantage of that scalability and flexibility to deliver attacks to your application. So I'm thinking of like the botnets that are out there.
Yep.
You can ramp those up and deliver a denial of service attack. I don't know what the record is right now, but I know it was in like the multi-terabit per second rate for I think the biggest attack that's been seen in the wild so far.
Yeah, we saw about a 650 gig attack a couple years back, denial of service attack, which was pretty huge. But you're right. I mean, we can utilize the cloud for applications and such, but so can hackers, right? They want to build their own botnet. They go ahead and spin up a bunch of machines at Amazon or Google or Azure.
Yeah.
They use it just like us.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's cloud for everybody, right?
Yep.
So I think the way that most people consume technology, at least for the end user, is through some sort of app. So whether it's an application on a desktop or more commonly these days on a mobile app of some kind. And that also seems to be a vector by which many security breaches are happening today. So does that line up with your experience, and how are we meant to combat that sort of attack.
Yeah, if you really think about it, as I mentioned earlier, applications have become so big, you're letting people into your network because we have customer-facing applications. And more companies are making revenue off of applications, they need to spin them up all over the world and serve their customers all over the world. It just gives you or hackers the ability to hack gain access to multiple different applications, right? So it's interesting. As you're trying to meet your customers' needs, let's say we'll talk about the cloud for a second, you also have this DevOps and CI/CD component to it where you want to spin up applications really quick and update applications really quick.
Sure.
When you do that, things are going to change in your application. You're going to give hackers more ability to hack your application. So as automation increases and as applications increase and automation increases, we have to meet that challenge from a security perspective, right?
Right.
So I'll give you an example. Let's say I got a new application that I want to spin up on the East Coast, right? So in Amazon, I spin up an application. I have to be able to protect that application right away. If that's automated, how do I get the security there? The security has to be part of the automated process. So that's really what we need to focus in on. If automation is going to play a big role in getting applications up quickly and updating applications quickly, we have to have security part of that automation process.
That's a great topic to bring up. The term that I've been hearing is, instead of just DevOps, DevSecOps.
Definitely.
So security is just integrated with the whole DevOps pipeline. So as code is checked in and infrastructure is spun up, there are tests in line that are doing security tests against, if it's containers, let's make sure this container doesn't have vulnerabilities. If you're exposing firewall ports, let's make sure that you're not exposing the wrong ones. And having that all in an automated fashion, so when that application is deployed on the East Coast, that you have the security controls already in place from, I guess, the application perspective. But what about, to mitigate attacks against that application? Sometimes people are leveraging software as a service, and I think that's part of what Imperva through the Encapsula offers. Is that something that can also be integrated into that CI/CD pipeline to add it as a node that needs security?
Well, what you would want to do, so going back to the way you describe things, so you have the DevSecOps, right, and you're making sure that your code is secure prior to you actually spinning it up and going in production.
Sure.
But as part of that process, once that application goes into production, you want to have an orchestration that allows you to spin up, say, for instance, a WAF in front of that application at the same time that application goes live.
Right.
Right? Because we know, we can do all the testing we want, but there's still going to be security vulnerabilities that we can't foresee, right? So if you spin up a WAF at the same time as you open up that application to the world, you're protected from attacks.
Right.
Now, that can be a WAF that's within the cloud, meaning, let's say AWS, for instance. We can be part of that orchestration process to spin up our SecureSphere WAF and be in front of your application. Or you can also run a process that spins up our cloud WAF in front of that application. So what we've done here at Imperva is we tried to make sure that we have a hybrid approach, right? Regardless if you're on premise, if you're in the cloud, we have an option for you. We just need to be part of the process.
Gotcha. Okay. I think from a DevOps perspective, the developers and the ops folks need to help out with security, but security to a certain degree is sort of everyone's problem, and so everyone sort of has a duty to contribute to that, and that includes users, administrators, and the vendors to a certain degree. Mm-hmm. So what are some things that maybe an end user could do to help improve security?
Well, I think it all comes down to the corporation or the enterprise, and that they have a process for making sure that their internal users should follow to make sure they're secure. And I'll just give you a couple examples. Like, it's interesting. I mention this whenever I give presentations. You've probably heard some of those or seen some of these applications that enterprises will use internally to send out phishing emails to their users and see if they'll click on them. So I do a presentation where I talk about that, and I think the number I use is something like 30% of employees actually click on those emails.
Okay, so I as an employee get an internal email that's actually a phishing email, but the company's doing it to test whether I've actually listened at the last security presentation.
Exactly. So probably over the last year, as I give my presentation, I show that metric to the audience, and then I talk to people afterwards. Most of them are like, oh, it's way more than 30%. It's like more like 50 or 60%. So if you really think about that, employees have to be part of the process. They have to make sure that they don't click on those emails. They have to follow the process that the enterprise puts forth to make sure that everything is secure. So don't click on phishing emails. Don't bring your laptop home and go to different sites that might get malware on your system and come plug it back into the network. They have to make sure that they're doing their part as well. But it all has to be the process has to be set forth by the corporation or the enterprise.
Right. And so that gets into the admin and security teams. So where do they slot into making sure that security is a priority at an organization?
Well, it all comes from the top down, right? But I mean, once it comes from the top down, I think it's the admin's responsibility to do the research, right? Because they're really guys who know they have to do the research and determine what to focus in on in the enterprise. Is it, malware? We need to make sure we have no malware in this enterprise. Everyone has to be up to speed. That's our focus. Otherwise, we can get compromised internally. They have to do the research to know where the holes are, and then they need to patch those holes.
Yeah, it seems like one of the more common attacks that I hear about today is some internal user gets an infected device, and that provides a beachhead for the attacker to get in and then spread out through the enterprise and start accessing other systems and elevating its privilege. And then even if you fix that compromised machine, it's too late. The attacker's already established other entry points within the network that they can use.
Oh, I'll tell you, and I guess I won't use the office's name, but it's a government institution. It happened in the last couple of years, something similar to that. Essentially what happened was a contractor came in with a laptop, which was infected, plugged it into their network. See, right there, that's another process that the admin should have stopped, right? You shouldn't be able to plug your own personal laptop into the network, but they did. It had code on it, infected their environment. That code allowed hackers into their environment. They put more code on all the jump servers that their DBAs and admins use to jump off to different databases and such.
Sure.
And just started grabbing information and shooting it out externally. It took them months to even discover that there was a problem.
Yeah.
So how do you combat against that from the outside? You can't. You have to make sure that you have the processes internally to make sure that doesn't occur.
Right. I think most of us coming from an on-premises environment, you're used to this sort of idea of I have a moat, I have a firewall and a DMZ, and that's my protection. But in reality, that's the hard candy shell. But once you get to the inside, it's ooey gooey and very fluid, and there's not a whole lot of controls in place. So, I mean, what do you think organizations need to do on the internal side to keep that security going once you get past that hard candy shell?
Once again, it's all about you have to have a process that every employee needs to follow. And then, you got to do the research, obviously, but then you have to set the process forward and make sure that your employees adhere to it. So once again, things like don't bring a outside laptop in. You can only use a laptop and or system that is provided by the organization. That way you can minimize your risk. Because anytime you allow your employees to go outside the process, the risk increases that you're going to get hacked.
Right. So I'm going to throw sort of a curveball here and move to a different topic, and that is many applications were originally just hosted on premises, and we got used to that, and we had security and controls in place. And then the public cloud rolled up, and now many of those applications are being hosted in the public cloud, and others are actually straddling both on-prem and the public cloud in more of a hybrid kind of mode. And even others might be hosted in multiple public clouds. So I've got my application, maybe one instance resides in Azure, another one resides in AWS, and I'm running my development in-house. So how do you even begin to apply security to such a disparate grouping of applications and environments?
Well, you go with Imperva products, right? Reason being is what we've done at Imperva is we've made sure we know that there's going to be, well, it has been growing. We've seen it grow where enterprises have a hybrid approach to their applications, meaning they originally had applications on premise, and then they lift and shift some of those applications, maybe not all of them, but some of those to the cloud.
Sure.
And eventually those will even be native cloud applications, meaning they just live in the cloud, they're developed in the cloud, they're never coming back, and they don't have any communication between on-premise and cloud. So you have to protect those applications wherever they reside and however they reside. And you also have to have a centralized tool to manage all that. If I have to have one application for securing my on-premise and another one for securing my cloud in AWS, a third one for securing my Azure deployment, your risk goes up, right? Also, you have to hire all these different employees with all these different backgrounds to manage all those different tools. With Imperva, with SecureSphere, what we have is we have a centralized GUI that can manage all that across all the different clouds.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something that I hear more and more as multi-cloud becomes a newer reality is that's great. I want to be able to deploy to all these different clouds, but I need tools that work across all these different clouds. And whether that's the security sphere that we're talking about, SecureSphere, security sphere. I see
SecureSphere.
Wow, that works. Or if we're looking at other things like deployment and automation tool sets.
Same difference.
Like, I mean, you have the native tool sets that exist in the public clouds. Like AWS has CloudFormation, which is great if you're just doing AWS. But if you need to automate the provisioning of infrastructure across multiple clouds, you need a tool that can do that.
You need some type of orchestration tool.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you want a tool that can implement security across multiple clouds, well, that would be very nice as well, as opposed to using just the native tools in every single cloud.
Exactly. And that way, so once again, you have a one-stop shop for all your security, or you have a one-stop shop for all your orchestration. So the nice thing is when somebody new comes into the organization, you teach them one tool. Right. Instead of someone leaves the organization and they have to learn 5 things. If you could have a one-stop shop for security and orchestration, that's the key. I think it just makes organizations be able to secure their applications quicker if you have a one-stop shop versus having to deploy all these different applications all over the place.
Right. And the other thing about the public cloud is that it has a bunch of native resources that don't exist in an on-premises environment. So I'm thinking about when you said like your application is becoming more native to the cloud.
Yeah.
So you're going to take advantage of the platform as a service features, whether that's RDS or Azure Functions or some sort of object-based storage like S3. But all of those also come with security challenges because a lot of time they're using a public endpoint to interact with your other resources. I'm especially thinking of S3 buckets.
Yep.
So, I mean, what do you think are some security challenges there, and how do we sort of address the more native platform as a service components?
Well, the interesting part is you have to have the ability to, once again, you got to secure it, right? But you have to have the ability to have a hybrid approach, because if I can't get something into in whatever cloud we're working in, like let's say, for instance, you talked about platform as a service. Maybe I have platform as a service out in AWS. Can I get something in front of that externally facing part of that to secure it that resides within AWS? If I can't, am I just done?
Right.
So what we have is we have a security as a service as well. We have a cloud WAF. So the nice thing is, even if we can't get something into the individual cloud within the actual cloud itself, we have encapsulated that can secure you as well.
Okay, so let's expand on that a little bit, because that's interesting to me. If I am using one of those public-facing services like S3, how would Encapsula sit in front of that and intercept requests?
Oh, good question. So all it is just DNS. So what would happen is
beautiful DNS.
Yeah, beautiful DNS. So all you're doing is, all Encapsula is we're essentially a proxy for your HTTP requests, HTTP or HTTPS. So all you would do is, normally if people went directly to that URL, let's just make up a URL. So it's www.anexinet.com. Let's say that actually resides, all the content for that resides in AWS.
Sure.
Everyone goes directly there. Some external address in AWS, they go to there to get the content. But now you want to secure that. It's not secure. All you would do is change your DNS records to point www.anexinet to Encapsula instead. So now when customers try to go to Anexinet, they would actually go to Encapsula instead. We'd filter that traffic for attacks and then forward it back to AWS.
Okay.
In that example.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're putting like a CNAME in
exactly.
your public DNS that'll send it to Encapsula first.
Anyone looks up that domain, they're actually coming to us. We're filtering it. We're a proxy for you.
Okay. I mean, another thing that I think of when we're talking about like web hosting and stuff like that is caching things in a content delivery network. That's fairly common, especially for the bigger websites. Is that also something that Encapsula can help out with?
Yeah, that's actually that's just something we offer for free if you onboard your applications with Encapsula. So once again, using that example, if you wanted us to front end your application with our Cloud WAF, we also have caching services. So we are a full CDN as well.
Oh, okay. So you wouldn't necessarily have to use some other third-party CDN.
Not at
You
all.
just kind of use the Encapsula CDN on top of what you're already doing.
That's correct, and it's totally tunable as well. So you can tune the CDN via GUI. But the nice thing there is a lot of users would think if you're going to forward your traffic through Encapsula, you're going to start to see some latency, right? Because we're a proxy.
Right.
People always equate proxy with latency, right? But because we have a full CDN, we actually speed up the performance of your application. So if you were to look at your performance on your applications prior to Encapsula and look at it after, you'd see it actually be faster. Because
And
we're
imagine,
caching a bunch of that.
To a certain degree, the traffic that's hitting your service first, a lot of that's getting filtered out. So from a hosted perspective, if I'm running an AWS and I got my application and I was seeing, X amount of traffic before I put Encapsula in front of it, now I'm seeing maybe 20% or less of that traffic coming through because the rest of that was some sort of spam attack or hacker attack or something, that's not legitimate traffic that I actually want to hit my service.
That is true. I've seen that in the past. I mean, just with WAFs in general. I'll give you an example. I had a customer who he deployed our WAF in front of his application, and his traffic was cut in half by 50% because 50% of it was just hackers trying to hack his application. Right. So the interesting part there, you talk about it, what if you have some rules in the back end in AWS that say, if I see a certain amount of traffic, I need to spin up more virtual boxes.
Yeah.
And you got to pay for that.
Yeah.
Right? So you're spinning up all these boxes because someone's attacking you and you're paying for that. But if you have Encapsula and or our WAF in front of your applications and you cut on that traffic, you're actually saving money.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's very common, especially for like a website, to have that back-ended by like an auto-scale group in AWS. And yeah, when traffic hits a certain threshold, you spin up another instance to handle that load. But yeah, you do have to pay for that instance when it's running. And the other thing you're paying for that people don't always think about is all the egress network traffic that's coming out of your application to the internet. AWS and Azure both charge you for that egress network traffic. So if you cut your incoming requests by 50%, that's 50% less traffic that's egressing out of your network.
So you saved on traffic and you saved on the virtual machines.
Yeah.
The cost of running them.
It reminds me a lot of spam and how, say 5 years ago, I saw a mass move from hosting your own internal spam filtering to going to spam filtering as a service with, there's a whole bunch of different vendors out there that do this. And part of it was just the reduction in traffic and load on your mail servers. Because, I mean, you talk about 50% reduction for, WAF traffic. We're talking like a 95% reduction in mail traffic.
Wow.
Oh, it's incredible. You look at the amount of volume that hits the spam hosted service versus what actually makes it through to your mail system. And yeah, it can be up to 95% reduction.
Wow, that's ridiculous. I mean, the hardware costs you save on the back end or, if they're hosted in AWS or whatever, it must be awesome.
Oh, yeah, it's tremendous.
Got to get in that business.
It's never too late, right? So we talked about Encapsula a pretty decent amount, but I think you'd mentioned the other Imperva product, which is SecureSphere, and that is not a hosted product, right? That's something that lives inside your environment, whether that is public cloud or on-prem, but either way, it sits inside your environment. So why would you choose one over the other, and what are some of the cool kind of feature sets that exist in SecureSphere?
Sure. So let's just be clear. So SecureSphere is two different products in one. So we can do database security with SecureSphere, or we can do web application security with SecureSphere. Same interface.
Okay, I'm curious about that database security thing, but we'll come back around to that.
So we'll talk about web application. So we've been in the web application firewall field for 15 plus years or so.
Okay.
That SecureSphere was our first product there on premise, but we've leveraged it to work in the cloud as well. It's a full enterprise WAF. It does both negative security and positive security, and a whole bunch of other features that Encapsula would not do. Encapsula, the cloud WAF, just does negative security, no positive security. When I talk about positive security, what I'm talking about is profiling. So SecureSphere, what it can do, SecureSphere WAF, is it can profile your entire website, every URL, every parameter value. So then what starts to occur is whenever a request comes in, we not only pass it through the negative security, which are signatures. Does this request match a signature? Yes, it's it's bad, it's negative security, right?
Right.
But also what it will do is it will take that request and look to see if that URL exists because we profiled it. If the parameters coming in that request match what we profiled as good traffic, if it doesn't match that, we can kick it out as well. It's not positive. That's hence the word positive security.
Right.
SecureSphere does that, Encapsulate does it on
Gotcha.
the positive security side.
So I saw a demonstration and a little bit of a presentation from one of your coworkers, and a situation he brought up that I thought was really interesting about filtering out requests is it's not uncommon for competitor sites to try to scrape your site to gain information and then maybe try to beat you out on price or copy your settings or do something.
Yep.
And it's also not uncommon for hackers to scrape your site and then try to create a phishing site based off of that. And you said that was something that could also be dealt with through the security products.
Definitely
Is that something you've seen?
I've seen.
Sounds very interesting
I'll
to me.
give you an example, and I won't use names, but there was a government agency I went out to, and they had an application, and what this application would do is a state government. What this application would do is just provide all of the locations for salmon fishing across the state. Right?
Okay.
So anyway, I went out there.
So not Arizona is what.
Exactly. But what they were having is their application was just dying, right? They were getting hit all over the place because what was happening were other individuals were creating applications and linking to all their data. Right.
Okay.
So they didn't mind it, but it just got to such a volume at the point it was killing their application, right? So what they were able to do is put a WAF in front of that and limit the number of requests that could come in from those individuals.
Gotcha.
So you can do that with a WAF. So you can definitely create velocity type of security policies that say if someone comes to a particular URL a certain number of times within a certain amount of time, block them or limit them. So you can definitely do that with the WAF.
That's an interesting type of situation.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to get back to, you mentioned database security with SecureSphere. Now, when I think of database servers, generally they should already be sitting behind some kind of security, whether it's a firewall or firewall policies on the box itself, and then the database itself should be secured, to only allow specific users access directly, because generally most users are hitting the database through an application. They're not usually going straight to it. So, sort of, what is the issue with database security, and how is SecureSphere trying to fix that issue?
Yeah, it's all about knowing who's doing what, when, and where with your data. Okay, and we talked about compromised insiders earlier.
Yeah.
That's one of the major problems that SecureSphere database firewall and/or DAM could help you out with. I'll give you an example. You mentioned somebody should be able to access a database via an application. So let's say I'll use myself. I have an account. Adam's supposed to be able to get to this Oracle database using an application, and I do. Guess what? You gave me access to that application. I could pull out as much data as I want. But now someone comes into your organization with another laptop that has malicious code on it. That code gets to my machine. They capture my user account and password, connect to that same application or same database with the same application and pull information out, but to their laptop, and walk out the door with it.
Right.
How would I know the difference between the true...
Right. As far as the database is concerned, no, this is all legitimate requests.
Legit. How do you know? There's no way to combat that, right?
Okay, yeah.
So what we do with SecureSphere on the database security side is we have another product called Counterbreach. What we're able to do is we're able to pull in log data from all the different databases and run a analytic feature against it. What we're able to do is profile all your database users' activity. For instance, going back to me as a user, I would know that Adam usually connects to the database through one application. I only usually connect to 2 databases. I usually connect to that database through 3 different hosts. All right, so I profile it all. Once I profile it all, now that same hacker comes in, pulls out his laptop, malicious code gets on, he hijacks my account, and he goes to connect to that database to the same application, but from his own IP. We throw off a flag. Why is Adam connecting to that database? Same application, same database, but he's coming from another IP.
Sure.
Or what if he directly tries to go to the database with that account? It's like, wait a second. He's still trying to get to it around the application. Normally, I've profiled that Adam would come through the application. Now he's going direct. You have to be able to know everything everyone is doing against your data, and then see if that activity is legit or not.
Wow, so that's a very interesting model. I'm sure it's using some sort of machine learning to sort of set a profile and a baseline and then detect anomalies. And if it gets beyond a certain standard deviation, throw up a flag.
Exactly.
Right? And so throwing up that flag, would that automatically block the request, or would it send an alert out to some sort of SIM or something to then take action?
Well, it all depends on what you want to do, really. So normally what customers are doing right now is they're just shooting that off to a SIM. They don't want to do blocking on the database side. I've seen the last couple years, probably 2 or 3 years ago, no one would do database blocking. They just wouldn't want to do it.
Right.
Just because, they didn't want to impact the applications that database was utilized for. But once in a while now, more and more customers are starting to see you have to block it, otherwise they're going to get to your data. But right now, I'd say primarily you just shoot it off to the SIM and deal with it.
Okay, so at least you have it in the audit trail.
Yep.
So that's great for database servers. Mm-hmm. What about things like file shares? If someone's trying to exfiltrate a whole bunch of file share information, are you tracking that through any utilities?
Same difference. That same application I just mentioned does it for file servers as well. So we can put agents. We can put agents on all your databases, all your file servers, and anytime anyone runs any type of access to those file servers or databases, they try and access them. All that's forwarded off to our analytics tool, behavioral analytics tool, on a daily basis. So we're constantly analyzing data from your access data from your databases and file servers, and throwing off alerts when we see something out of the ordinary.
Right, and the most common type of attack that I feel like we hear about now is that exact situation where someone establishes a beachhead inside an organization and slowly tries to exfiltrate data. And usually, I guess the way that they do it is they'll get on one machine, try to escalate their privilege to a couple others, and then they'll try to exfiltrate just a small amount of data from little sources saying, ooh, can I get to this? Ooh, can I get to that? And then slowly turn up the dial to pull out more and more so it doesn't set off any alarms on maybe the firewall side.
Yep.
But it sounds like on your side, that will still show up as an anomaly, and it should trigger something on the SIM side.
Definitely. It's interesting. As part of the presentation that I normally give, I talked about earlier, there's another metric they use that compromise. It takes about, for compromised attacks internally, it takes about 2 weeks for you to figure out that a compromise has occurred on average.
Okay.
So 2 weeks, somebody's in your network slowly grabbing data, just like you mentioned.
Right.
Can you think about that? How much data can they grab? Also, if you really think about it, if Adam, my user, has been given access to that same database we were talking about earlier, can I limit how much data he can grab from the databases? Not normally. We don't usually limit that. But if a hacker gains access or grabs my credentials, he might grab 100,000 records, 200,000 records, when I normally only grab maybe 10,000 a day. With SecureSphere or Counterbreach, you're able to determine right away, because of the profiling, that Adam's grabbing 100,000 records. On a normal daily basis, he only grabs 10,000, throws off an alert. Additionally, we can compare you against a group of users. So if Adam's a DBA and I'm part of a group of 10 DBAs, I can start to look at what the 10 DBAs do as a whole on a normal day. So maybe we average between 1,000 records pulled back to 100,000 a day as a group, but Adam's pulling back 4 million. That's a red flag.
Yeah. That's a red flag that Adam might be getting ready to leave the organization with a whole boatload of information.
Yeah. It's just not compromised users, right? A lot of times when data is stolen, it's because employees are a little bit pissed, for lack of a better word, and they want to grab some data and
maybe they're headed off to a competitor, or maybe they just think it's valuable.
Exactly, but it's not just compromised users. Definitely a lot of disgruntled employees grab data on the way out the door.
Huh. Wow. So another way to protect against that. Wow. So that's about all the time we have. First of all, thank you so much, Adam, for coming in and talking about security and the Imperva solutions. It's pretty interesting stuff. My one last question, I like to ask this for everyone. What is your favorite 80s movie?
Oh, goodness gracious. Man. 80s movie.
Don't think about it too hard.
What is it? Oh, God. I can't. You're stumping me here. What is it? The Last Dragon. That's my favorite.
Last Dragon.
You got to check it out. The Last Dragon. Was Show Enough?
Show Enough?
Show Enough?
Am I the prettiest?
Kiss my Converse? Come on.
Oh my God, I haven't thought about that movie in forever. That's awesome. All right, well, now I know what I'm doing tonight. Okay. Adam Burton, thank you so much for being on the Anexinet Pod.
No problem. Thank you very much.
And that was our show with Adam Burton. Thanks to the marketing team for helping me pull this together. Thanks to Anexinet for helping produce this podcast. If you're looking for a company to help you with your digital transformation, then I would recommend reaching out to Anexinet, see how they can help. If you've enjoyed this episode of Anexinet Pod, why not leave a nice review on iTunes? If you're looking for more content, you can check out our sister podcast, Buffer Overflow. On the show, I am joined weekly by my co-host Chris Hayner to discuss what's new and interesting in the IT news sphere. You can find out more about me and what I'm up to on Twitter at Ned1313 or on my website, nedinthecloud.com. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, IT moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to look around once in a while, you could miss it.